All right. So, Jen had a hole in the schedule and asked me if I wanted it. Of course, I said for sure, happy to help out. And I was thinking about what I could share right now that I'm working on that I thought might be helpful for you all as well. So, the title of this program, which as Jen mentioned, is going to turn into a three-part series, uh, Super Small Business Growth Hacks, assumes that you want to grow something, either revenue, profit, or time. Now, if you have no interest in growing any of those, then what I have to say today is probably not going to be all that interesting. On the other hand, even if you are not like in empire building mode, um, I'm guessing, like, who doesn't want to grow at least one of those, right? Revenue, profit, or have more time. So hopefully this is going to be of value for you, regardless of whether you are looking at your business in terms of scaling up or just trying to make it more profitable or get more time away or from it. So that's the idea for today. Now, I'm going to give you a little context for what I'm sharing today because I think it's relevant. So, just looking through the attendee list before I went to full screen mode, I know many of you, although not all, and I think most of you know a little bit about me, but some of you don't. So, here's the deal. I had a company called the API Guys, which you may have heard of, which I sold about 6 weeks ago. And so I am literally starting from scratch, a new company. This is company number 10 for me. Um, 6 of those companies were really not very successful at all. Number 7 was hugely successful, 8 and 9 moderately so, and now I'm on number 10. But I literally 6 weeks ago, without really any warning, to speak of, ended up in a position where I was starting a new company from scratch. So the what I'm going to share with you today really is kind of comes out of that, because I'm really approaching this company a little bit differently in the way I'm doing it, and my thought process is I'm being much more intentional about things. I Every time I say this is my last company, my husband just rolls his eyes. He says that's like me saying it's my last horse. But anyway, that is the idea that this is going to be my perfect small business. So that's the context for what I have to say today, and what I mean when I say start with the end in mind, right? The famous Stephen Covey idea. But this is one of my most important business principles. The folks who have worked for me over the years probably get tired of hearing me say this, but I just believe it is so important with everything that we do, and yet, I have not necessarily done that myself in terms of building my own businesses. A lot of times I do it in the business, but I don't do it with the business itself. The business sort of, ends up being either by accident or takes some kind of a weird path. This one, I am starting with the end in mind. I chose this picture very uh, uh, some of you have seen this before, but the purpose of this business, I'm retired. For those of you who don't know, I retired after business number 7. This is what my retirement looks like. But the purpose of this business is to pay for my polo. That is it, right? So I'm starting with the end in mind, and saying, what do I want this business to look like? And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to actually share, I'm going to lift up the covers and I'm going to share a little bit about what I'm doing here, because again, I think when I get to the piece I want to share with you, this will help you understand it a little bit better. So to lift the covers up, here is my goal. My goal is to build a mature business, which is funny given that it's 6 weeks old. The definition of mature business comes from a book called Making Money is Killing Your Business, which I highly recommend. A mature business, the definition of his, or at least his definition of a mature business, is one in which you are not the producer. If you go on vacation, or you, in my case, go to Argentina for a month to play polo, that the business continues to make money without you. That's the definition of a mature business. That I want to build a data-driven business that is run off of the numbers, something I've not necessarily done as well at previously. How big do I want to be? I want to be $1 million specifically. I picked that number on purpose. I don't want to be bigger. I don't want to be smaller. I want to be $1 million. It's going to be a training company. That's what we do at IS Beginner. Specifically, we train on Infusionsoft. And importantly, that it lets me do what I want, when I want, by the end of 2016. So that's the goal. Okay. It started by saying, what is my ideal lifestyle look like? What sort of money does it take to support that lifestyle? And how am I going to get from point A to point B? By the way, this goal that I've come up with is also a bit of an insurance policy, because if I can no longer be the producer, then what happens to those people that rely on my production, right? So not only if I'm the producer, this idea of a mature business, if I'm the sole producer, then not only does my income suffer if something were to happen, and I can't do what I want when I want, but the more people I have dependent on me, the more problematic that becomes. So anyway, so that is the end that I'm starting with, and to the right is my big why. Okay, so how do we achieve that goal? Just so you know, I have said that is by helping 5,000 people to use Infusionsoft to grow their own businesses between now and then. So that's the company I'm started out 6 weeks ago to build. Now here's what's interesting. As entrepreneurs, or especially solopreneurs, or the hybrid of that, a kind of a solopreneur with a couple of contractors sort of thing. If you look at it, when we at this stage that I am at, and that I suspect most of you are at, and in fact most Infusionsoft small businesses are at, when you're trying to either grow or transform a business into that mature business that I talked about, most of our challenges are going to be resource problems. Okay, it is either time or money, and it is generally not only the lack thereof, but also the inefficient use. So either we don't have enough time or money, and what we have, we don't use it properly. Now, if your business is at other stages, you probably have different problems than resource problems. But at this stage, that's generally the primary issue. And I would argue that time is the bigger problem than money, because you can always make more money. Always. But you can't make more time. So for our purposes, money is money is not finite, but time is. Okay? Now, given that time is my biggest constraint, I want to share with you what I'm doing and how I am creating visibility and financial accountability for how I spend my time every single day. That has just made a tremendous difference for me over the last 5 weeks or so that I've been doing this, compared to what I was doing previously. And what it is, it's called the Entrepreneur Scorecard. And the Entrepreneur Scorecard is not my idea. The way I implemented it is my own, but the Entrepreneur Scorecard itself comes from Todd Herman and his 90-day coaching program, which I'm a member of. And the reason that I decided to share this with you is because this is where I am right now, and it's working for me. And so I thought it might be interesting for you all as well. Just so you know, I've been using the Entrepreneur Scorecard religiously for the last 5 weeks to tie what I'm doing every minute of every day directly, straight line of sight to that $1 million number. Okay, and which is of course not only consistent with being a data-driven company, but having very limited amount of time and a very short deadline to get this all done on. Okay, so let me tell you about a little bit more about the Entrepreneur Scorecard, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like. So the assumptions behind the Entrepreneur Scorecard, there are two of them actually. The first one is that where you are today is the result of what you did 90 days ago. I mean, that's at least my interpretation of the assumption. Ergo, now, by the way, 90 days, 90 days, 100 days, 120 days, whatever. But if you think about it, that's true. Ergo, what you do today will determine where you are 90 days from now, right? Now, the problem with that idea, I mean, I can look back and I can say, the physical shape I'm in today is the result of either my exercise routine or lack thereof 90 days ago, what I ate 90 days ago, etc. My business today is the result of the actions I took 90 days ago. The problem with that idea when you move it forward, which is that what you do today is going to determine where you are 90 days from now, is that it disconnects my actions today from the outcome. It's very nebulous. Tomorrow is the most popular day of the week kind of thing. It's like, okay, well, that's just great. I'm trying to achieve certain things in my business, but how do I tie the actual actions that I'm taking today really to them? Okay. So that's part of the idea of the Entrepreneur Scorecard. And then, of course, the second assumption is this idea that we're all familiar with, that what gets measured gets managed. For example, studies show that just tracking what you eat without meaning to change anything causes you to lose weight. Just as one example, what gets measured gets managed. So here are the steps that we take with the Entrepreneur Scorecard. At a high level, it is this. It's really actually quite simple. What we do is, first of all, you've got to figure out how to turn that big number into a daily number. So what you do is you take that, for example, my $1 million number, which I shared with you, and then you figure out realistically how many days will you work during whatever your target period is, or can you work, or maybe do you want to work, and then divide your goal number by the number of days that you're going to work. So for me, for example, and I actually did figure this out, but fortunately it just came out to a nice round number. So I look at the calendar, I look at my polo schedule, and holidays and everything else, and I say, realistically, I will work 200 days in a year, and I want to make $1 million for the year as a company, and so divide that out, that's $5,000 a day. Simple, nice round number. So I've taken my $1 million goal and my realistic expectations about time and ideal lifestyle and turned it into a daily number, $5,000 a day. Now, what you do then is you track the time that you spend each day, which is where people start groaning. But don't worry, this isn't as onerous as it sounds. But what you do is you put it into buckets. And these buckets are simple but ingenious. So, as an example, Todd Herman, suggests, who came up with this thing, 10-hour buckets, $100 an hour buckets, $1,000 an hour buckets, and $10,000 an hour buckets. Now, the idea isn't necessarily what you could pay someone to do the work for you, because of course, there's not $10,000 an hour jobs. That's it. I mean, that may be a factor, but what you're really doing, which is different, is you're saying, this task, this hour that I'm spending, whatever I'm spending it on, what is the impact of that hour, of that activity, of that task on the business likely to be 90 days out, or whatever that kind of time horizon is. So if I spend an hour doing this, is this likely to bring $10 of revenue or $10,000 of revenue? Okay. And now for different people and different businesses, these buckets are going to be different. If I'm a venture capitalist, these may be I may start at $10,000 an hour buckets, right? But the idea is that that fourth bucket should be a really, a fairly big stretch and kind of a 10x jump from one bucket to the next. Okay. And then finally, at the end of the day, once you do these calculations of how you spent your day, you put the result somewhere that you can see it. And the goal is that if you take your total hours for the day multiplied by the value of each hour, that should exceed your daily target. And that if you do this day in and day out, that the result should ultimately be something like your target number. In other words, if I spend at least 5 hours a day doing $1,000 an hour tasks or activities, tasks is a bad word, activities, and I do that day in, day out, month in, month out, then assuming, of course, that I'm working on the right thing, because, the Entrepreneur Scorecard can't save a bad idea, for example, right? But assuming that I have a viable business with a viable product fit and all of those things, and that I spend my time in that way, then ultimately, actually sooner rather than later, I should be getting to something like that target number. Okay, so given that obvious caveat about can't save a bad idea, that's the idea. Okay, so with that in mind, okay, that as sort of the preamble, I'm going to show you what this looks like for me, and I'm going to just tell you that I did my spreadsheet, for example. I did not pretty this up for you guys. I did that on purpose because, of course, in keeping making my spreadsheet pretty is a $10 an hour task, not a $1,000 an hour task. All right, so it's just exactly the way I use it every single day. I actually felt like that would probably be more useful than me making a nice, pretty spreadsheet. So let me flip out of this presentation and I'll show you how I do this without burning up tons of hours in my day tracking my day. Okay, so this is my Entrepreneur Scorecard, and I'll show you the tracking in just a moment. Not pretty, but you get the idea, right? So what I did first is, just as I explained to you, I sat down and I said, all right, well, I actually have a I have a short term. I need to get this thing off the ground, and I need to get it off the ground fast. So I have like a 90-day revenue target of $100,000. That, when I look at a calendar, that's I'm working every day, heads down, right? I rarely take a day off right now. I'm in startup mode. But anyway, 63 days is what I, reasonably said, because I got, you got to have some time. And then that worked out into a daily target of 1587. But the bigger one, and the one I'm tracking to, is this $1 million number. Okay, so 200 days working works out to be $5,000. So this is my my daily target. Okay. I just over here, these are columns, as you'll see, 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. These are my buckets. Now, what I started doing is when I first started doing this, I would actually make an individual little spreadsheet here, and I would put my time in here, and I would sort of put the different tasks that I was doing to get a sense of what they were. But and I did that for a while, and then I would just put the summary numbers over here on this main page, and I very quickly realized that that was a total waste of time. And because one of the effects I'm going to talk to you about here is, like, this becomes a big game that you're playing with yourself every day. And I'm like, heck, we're not doing that. So after a little while, you can see what I started to do is just say, forget that, right? I'm going to take my hours out of the tracking software and I'm just going to put them right here in the buckets. And so once I started doing that, then it starts to look like this. And a couple other things I'll just tell you is in the beginning, right? I was like, oh yeah, for sure, that's $10,000 time, and then I quickly got very realistic with myself. In fact, one of the most interesting aspects of doing this exercise every day is it starts to really have you rethink what you're doing and how you value those things, and you start to realize some interesting things. Like, for example, the actual delivery of your product is some of the least valuable time that you spend. Things like that are quite interesting. But I realized that at this stage in my business, you know, I'm on like total tactical startup stuff. I work hard to get $5,000 hours. I am not spending time on $10,000 stuff right now. Don't kid myself. So anyway, those numbers are for the moment zero. And where I spend, most of my time is I try to spend it here in the $1,000 bucket. But as you'll see when I show you how I track this time, there is an overhead in the of time that I must spend every day in that, or well, I shouldn't say must, but I choose to spend in this $10 bucket, and a little bit in the $100 bucket, but this is where I spend the majority of my time. Okay, and so this is just a calculation. All it's doing is taking the amount of hours I spend every day, multiplying it by those numbers, 10, 100,000, 10,000, to come up with a value for my day. I have an over under my $5,000 target, and I keep some notes, like that I took the day off, or up here that I was traveling, which you can just see, like, even though I thought I was going to be so productive while I was traveling, just absolutely tore a hole in my whole program. But anyway, I keep the over under, and now what I've started doing as well is I just keep a running total of the over under for the last 10 days. Because again, as long as this number is over, I may have a negative here and there and some positives, but in general, as long as I'm over zero there, I'm probably in pretty good shape. So this is again, what I like about this is totally tactical, what I'm sharing with you, but this is absolutely line of sight. Like right now, I'm spending an hour on this webinar, and that hour that I'm spending on this webinar has a direct impact on whether I'm going to make that $1 million number or not. And the way that I account for that is right here in these numbers for the day. Okay, so this is how I do the scorecard. Other people in the program do it way different than me, but this is the way I've chosen to implement it. Now, the other thing, of course, because we are at us Infusionites, we are all about automation. I do not want to sit here and track all this time every day, and I do not. So what I do is I use a program called Rescue Time. And I had been familiar with Rescue Time before I started doing this. Never used it, came back to it when I started the Entrepreneur Scorecard. And it has made the Entrepreneur Scorecard doable for me. Otherwise, I just don't see, I just feel like you would spend more time doing the scorecard than the value that it brings. But I use the free version of Rescue Time. Doesn't cost me anything. The main reason I can use the free version is because I am in front of a computer most of the day, and it just runs in the background and watches what you're doing, and it learns how to put it in my buckets very fast. It learns what buckets to put things in. If you were a salesperson or someone who was on the on the road or offline a lot of your time, then to track that time you would need the premium version. I don't. Um, and it just, as I said, it's you can see it up here. It's up here in my menu bar. Up here, it's also sitting in my browser, and it just watches what you do every day. And for the first few days, what you do is you tell it which bucket to put your time in. And literally, I mean, it's down to the the tab, the browser tab that you're spending your time on. Now, for me, what I did is it naturally has this report called the productivity report, where there's all kinds of ways that you can split your time. It'll tell you by application and by website and by category. But this productivity report actually has 5 buckets. And so for me, and they worked out perfect. So for me, that what I use is very productive is my $10,000 bucket. Productive is my $1,000 bucket. Neutral is my $100 bucket, and distracting is my $10 bucket. They also have a very distracting, and that basically I've taught it that if this is more personal stuff, so like if I'm checking the weather or things like that, it sticks it in this very distracting bucket, and I don't even count it in my Entrepreneur Scorecard. So really, it's just these 4 buckets. And as I said, it learns which bucket to throw things in very quickly. For the first couple days or week, I would go through each one of these and correct where it put things. And after that, I barely touch it. At the end of the day, I open this up or during the day to see how I'm doing, although eventually you get a little clock in your head and you start to know how you're doing. And I just take these numbers at the end of each day, and as part of my end of day routine, I put them in my spreadsheet, and I am literally done. So just to give you a kind of a sense of what I mean by how it figures out what is what. For me, this is me. Everyone's going to be different. Okay. I have about an hour and a half a day of what I call communication overhead, and which is mostly Gmail, mostly mail and calendaring and scheduling and to-do lists and all of that stuff. And as hard as I have tried to get that below an hour and a half, short of hiring an assistant to do that sort of stuff for me, I really can't get below an hour and a half a day. But that hour and a half, because I'm aware of it every day, it pains me. I know I'm doing it. I know I need to get away from it. I don't get lost in it because kind of this game I play with myself. I know it's being tracked. And then neutral time, you can figure that. And then, but then the productive time would be like building out product and whatever, do sales. All those sorts of things. So anyway, I won't necessarily bore you with the details unless someone's interested with that. Because it's going to be different for everybody. However, the more important point is this idea of four buckets with a future value and impact on your income and your time and your ideal lifestyle, which is why most of us became small business people in the first place. Yes.
Hey, Kim, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I had a couple of questions that are relevant right now, so I wanted to jump in. On your Entrepreneur Scorecard, are the actual column, is that actual revenue? Is that forecasted revenue? And then, where would that come from for a startup kind of business?
Yeah, great. No, this is not actual revenue. So what this is the actual quote value of the time I spent today. So if you look at this calculation up here, okay, what this is doing is it is taking you can actually see here, let me make this bigger because it's now colored. Right? It's taking the hours that I spent in each one of those buckets, multiplying it by the value of that bucket, and adding them all together to say, in theory, right, if because I spent 5 hours yesterday on $1,000 activities, that at this imaginary point in the future, there's no way to like say exactly when it is, but this, I shouldn't say imaginary, this theoretical horizon that I'm working with, that 5 hours spent yesterday should translate to something like $5,000 worth of value or revenue to the business, in the future. So that's why I say it's a way of taking something that you're doing today and creating a direct line of sight to the outcome on that future time horizon. And if you're managing to that goal, to that $5,000 number in my case, then the idea is that it does ultimately begin to pay off. It's of course not dollar for dollar, and it assumes that you're doing a good job of, number one, valuing the activities that you do every day and being realistic about that. But that that feedback loop in and of itself has some value. If you're spending, if 90 days from now, so let me just finish kind of answering that question a little bit. It, like, I saw really, it was just an exercise in faith to begin with. But it's really been in the last week or two where all of a sudden I'm real, I knew I'd been more productive in the last 5 weeks than I'd been in the last 6 months. And I mean serious heads down, churning out great stuff, kind of work. But it's really been in the last, week or two that I start to really feel the impact, and that that it's having the result I want. And I'm 5 weeks in. So you're kind of just going on faith that this is going to translate into a real number if you're being realistic with it. And then to answer your other question, this over under number is just me saying, did I make my target for the day or not? This is the non-salesperson's. Here's another way to think of it. This is the non-salesperson's version, or way, the entrepreneur's quota, if you will. That's actually the best way I know how to describe it. Did that
I
help?
believe so. Let us know out there in the questions if that helped address your question. And then have a couple more real quick. Another one was, then how do you clock your appointment billable time with clients? Like, where does that go into?
So, well, for me, I don't have billable time with clients right now, because, well, I don't have any billable time with clients anymore, because the nature of IS Beginner is that we do training, and it's all online training. So all of my current activity is, number one, building out those training programs, doing the sales and marketing and writing the content and all of that sort of thing. However, if I was delivering services to a client, that would get tracked here in rescue time, just like anything else. Now, I guess it would depend on how I'm doing. That was kind of my point before. If I'm doing that online through Skype or GoToMeeting, which is how I used to do it, then it would know that time, I valued that time a certain way, and it would start putting it in, that time on, let's just say, because I used GoToMeeting when at the API guys, with my all my client work. So it would, however I valued that $100 an hour, then it would start to know that GoToMeeting was $100 an hour time, and it would put it in that $100 bucket, and that's how it would show up on that line. Now, obviously, if you spend all of that time like on the phone, like, or in person, things like that, then you're going to have to start doing some of the work to track that. You would, like, for example, rescue time, if you have the premium version, which I don't have to, but anyway, it allows you to add time manually for that, and that's how you would do that.
And then to build on that one for the rescue time, is there a way, or how do you teach it to calculate emails to clients that are billable or general? Is there a way to do that?
There is not a way to do that. I would argue with you just by virtue of the fact that I have been doing this for a while that a billable email is really no more valuable than than an email to your mother. um, but that said, I mean, you just have to decide for yourself. To me, right, all of my email goes in the $10 bucket. Honestly, whether it's to a potential customer or a potential, I mean, I don't see, even though it may contribute to that sale, a sale itself is only $100 sale, and the email part of it is like the least valuable part of it. So again, what you're trying to say is, the activity itself, what impact does it have on your business? If you didn't send that email, like, it's hard for me. I, and I don't want to lead you too much because you really have to come to these conclusions and distinctions for yourself. Like I said, I started out putting a lot more value on a lot more activities than the value I put on them now. And so the short answer to your question is no, it won't make that fine grained of a distinction. You would have to do that, but you could simply by, if I go into my, I'll just show you, if I go into my distracting time, I should have just answered your question this way to begin with. If I go into my distracting time, which is my Gmail bucket, it will do two things. First of all, it will keep track of the tabs, but I can also do by hour, and that's probably about as granular as I'm gonna do. Like I know, at 5 a.m. the time I spent on my Gmail was to so and so. At 7 a.m., I may do it that way, but that's about as granular as it has the ability to get.
All right. I think we're good with questions so far. So continue on.
Okay, great, great, great. Um, okay, so well, let me jump back into my presentation then, because this is kind of the guts of it, the idea. One thing that will be really interesting. So I've been doing this for 5 weeks, and as you can see, pretty religiously for 5 weeks. I haven't really missed a day. And it's made a huge difference. But to whoever's question who asked me, was that a real revenue number? Because because the time I spend today really has nothing to do with today's revenue. The whole point of this is that it has to do with the revenue, not, I am affecting today what's going to happen 90 days from now. What will be interesting as I get further and further along in this is to start to put revenue numbers, next to this from 90 days from now, and start to just see how close I come. Here's my sense of it. Find my presentation. My sense of it is this. So, well, before I tell you my sense of it, let me verbalize or articulate for me what it does. So what this has done for me is that it is basically created, I told you I wanted to be a data driven company. But it's created financial accountability basically for how I spend my time. It puts a dollar figure on the time that I spend every day. And as I said to you, I started it because the logic kind of appealed to me. It was very hard to see how it was going to play out at first or see any results from it. It is very definitely starting to pay off. I know I would not be as far as I am in 5 weeks had I not been working this system. I have gotten more done in the last 5 weeks than I've gotten done in the last 5 months. And more importantly for me, I know that the things that I'm doing are the right things, which is why I think they're starting to show up in my results. But so at a more granular level, than just a financial accountability, here's what I mean by that. It tells me, if you look at it, it tells me really clearly what I either need to offload or stop doing or carefully manage, like email, or any number of other things. Um, like I said, it shows you some really interesting paradoxes, like this idea that the delivery of your work is some of the least valuable work that you do. The marketing of your business, and is some of the most valuable work that you do. So it really addresses that whole urgent versus important quadrant that that we as small business people constantly wrestle with. It causes you to take activities like posting on social media, for example, and really say, is this of value or not? Can I put a number on? Ideally, can I put a number on this? A lot of things switched for me. A lot of things that I initially sort of just without thinking about said, "Ooh, that's $1,000 activity," and "Ooh, this is time suck Facebook $10 activity." Ended up flipping around, delivering certain things that I mean, they literally flip around, but it's different for every business in the way that, the numbers worked out for me, or I think they're working out for me, may very well end up being different for you based on your business and how you run your business. But it definitely makes you much more aware, and it's interesting. The other thing is that the fact that I am quantifying this every day creates a little bit of gamification, right? Especially in the beginning, like I would turn rescue time off, when I was kind of not doing productive things so that it wasn't going against my target but the fact that forget I don't do that now, right? But just the idea that I can check and see how I'm doing against a target every day, I'm really competitive. Did I make my number or did I not? Like I said, it's definitely like a quota for me. If I know I'm behind, it's like what can I do that's really productive that'll catch me up to my my $5,000 number. What's been my best day? Can I beat that in the same number of hours? Things like that. So there's a game element to it that's useful, especially when you work by yourself and you don't really have anybody to push you. Here's another interesting idea, and we'll see if this is true or not. But what I believe is that it creates a realistic forecast of what my numbers are going to look like in the future, which is a funny way to forecast. But think about it this way, y'all. So if, at the beginning of the year, we sit down and we say, oh, I'm going to grow my business by 20% this year. Really? Like, based on what or how? And, I don't know about you, but a lot of times we sit down and we create these plans and, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And a week later, those plans are not worth the paper that they're written on because for any number of reasons, right? But so this, for me, the sort of freeing idea was that this is sort of like my pipeline report. If you believe that $5,000 worth of activity today is going to result in roughly, and again, who knows if they're going to be close, but it doesn't matter how close they are, in commensurate value, 90 or 100 or 200 days from now, then if I know I'm beating quote plan, beating my value, my daily target by 20% every day, then my numbers should be going up. I should be growing. I should be able to create more value and more leverage as I start to move into $10,000 an hour activities. It gives me the freedom to invent my way to $1,000,000. As long as I'm correctly assessing the value of my time each day, all I have to do every day is invent my way to 5,000, and I will invent my way to 1,000,000. That's kind of the way I look at it. What I put in the top should come out at the back at some reasonable point in the future. And then finally, like I said, that it gives me that roadmap. Because what I really want is, as quickly as I can, to stop seeing zeros in that $10,000 column and start seeing numbers in that column, because what that means is now I'm scaling and now I have other people doing the $100 an hour activities and hopefully even the $1,000 activities, so I can start to be CEO again, as opposed to chief cook and bottle washer, which is then when I'm going to not only have the money to live my ideal lifestyle but the time as well, which is really kind of what this is all about. So that's the idea. What questions do you guys have?
Phew. All right. I do have some questions on here. And then just to remind everyone as well, if you have additional questions for Kim, go ahead and type those in so we can get those addressed. But a question that came up was, what is an example of $10,000 work for you?
Yes. So $10,000 work is would like I said, I thought I've scaled that back. Like a joint venture opportunity, for example, would be $10,000 work. A launch, would be $10,000 work. And I mean a legitimate, multi five figure launch. Obviously, if my list is not built up and commensurate with the ability to do a 5-figure launch or a 6-figure launch, then that work is not. It's $1,000 work. But a launch, would be getting to the point where I could do those sorts of launches. Yeah, that'd be $10,000 work. Things like that. Things that are highly leveraged activities, or very strategic activities. If I'm working on the sale of my business, which I don't intend to do, because this is my last one,
I'll believe that when I
that
see
would be
it.
10,000. Yeah, right. That would be $10,000 work.
Awesome.
Things like
Awesome. That makes sense. A couple other things here. I had a comment from one of the partners that you did an awesome job showing how to implement this in real life, because she had watched Todd's videos and have the scorecard, but this was a really good way to make it real. So thank you for that.
Good.
And then, is there a template for the Entrepreneur Scorecard, or do we just have to make one up based on what we saw today?
Yeah, there is no template. Again, I think, like I said, my way of implementing is my own. The idea was not mine, but my way of implementing is my own. Of course, as you guys know, I am always happy to share, and I love shortcuts. So if anyone wants my Excel spreadsheet, I am more than happy to give that to you, just to save you an hour of $10 work. No problem. But yeah, there's no place where you can. That spreadsheet, something I just came up with on my own. If it helps you, you're welcome to it. Email me.
Awesome.
My
okay.
email address
I'm
is
for
on
questions
the screen.
real quick. Let's see. I got some yeah. Go ahead.
While you're checking, yeah. Well, yeah. So for me, here's the kind of the key. Just a little summarize a little bit. First of all, the key to making this work is that it happens automatically. Right? I mean, again, if I had to do this every day, I would not have lasted 5 weeks. I can promise you that. And you do have to take a little leap of faith.
All right. All right. So going through here, I have some other random questions. What's your take on video work? Do you think that'd be like $1,000 bucket or $10,000 bucket, or would that depend on the value put with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally depends on your business. But for me, like, I've realized that's $1,000 work, because a lot of the content creation type stuff is ended up in I started in $100 bucket and became $1,000 bucket, because I realized that that's the thing that brings in lots of customers at a time, as opposed to talking on the phone, which
That
is
makes
one
sense.
customer at a time.
All right. Any other questions, group? Or if I missed your question, you might have to type it again, because there was a lot going on, so I was trying to monitor it. So any other questions? Hopefully I addressed the ones that were in here, and if I didn't, I'm going to apologize tremendously. All right. So if you don't mind, Kim, can I steal back the presentation controls? All right. So hopefully you guys... Nope, I can take it over. Nope.
Absolutely.
And then hopefully you guys do have Kim's contact information, Kim@isbeginner.com. That way you can reach out to her as well and not have that $10 work of creating your own spreadsheet. So I got a couple of, we'll take you up on that offers in the chat. So